Top reasons why you should be tolerant towards your spouse. Hi, friends. Welcome to Marriage Realities, a comprehensive relationship channel. Today's video is all about why you should be tolerant towards your spouse. It is sad that in modern marriages, most couples are impatient and edgy towards their spouse. Do you know that intolerance is one of the top reasons behind many failed marriages? I'm sure you too feel intolerant towards your spouse many a time. And I'm sure your intolerance towards your spouse creates tons of relationship issues between you. Do you know what happens when you're not tolerant towards your spouse? When you're not tolerant, you overreact when your spouse does things according to his or her way. You become impatient and irritable to the minor mistakes of your spouse. When your tolerance level towards your spouse is low, you do not have the patience to understand his or her viewpoint. You easily get irritated with the innocuous words your spouse utters as you feel it is offensive to you. In your impatience, you construe many hidden meanings in it. This brings great disagreement between you and makes you feel very unhappy in your relationship. I feel irritated with the behavior of my husband. Farida, my cousin's daughter, told me. Why do you feel so, dear? I asked the young girl. Well, auntie, my husband never listens to any of my suggestions. I want him to change his way of dressing. He does not listen to me. I want him to change certain habits which I find very annoying to me. He completely ignores it. I hate my husband leaving his clothes in the bed. The poor girl went on and on complaining about her husband. Why is my husband not listening to me, well knowing how much it makes me angry? Farida asked me confusedly. You're doing it all wrong, dear. You're being plain intolerant towards the normal behavior of your husband. Why do you want to change your husband's habits and way of dressing? It is his right, isn't it? I patted her in the back. Farida is a classic example of how tolerance is slowly disappearing from relationships. Tolerance is not looking with your eyes, but rather with your heart, says Katrina Taylor. How true her words are. Most of you look at the trivial and innocuous characteristics of your spouse with a magnifying glass to make a fight out of it. This is one mistake you should never make. When you're keen on finding faults with your spouse, it makes your married life highly tense and hostile. Ask any successful couple the key ingredients to the happy marriage. The answer will invariably be tolerance and patience. Only tolerance can make you behave patiently with your spouse. Why do you behave intolerant towards your spouse? It is because you expect certain qualities from your spouse. And when the qualities you expect from your spouse is missing, you feel that you've married a wrong person. You're doing it all wrong. You cannot expect a perfect spouse. You cannot also expect your spouse to mirror your wishes. And you cannot expect your spouse to be pliable towards you always. Will you be able to satisfy your spouse if he or she has such expectations about you? Understand that you are not what your spouse expected you to be. So, just like you, your spouse also will have his or her own share of faults and mistakes. What are the common aspects which makes you intolerant towards your spouse? You are unable to tolerate the laziness of your spouse. You become keyed up by his or her disorganized way of doing things. You become impatient when your spouse takes his or her own sweet time to get ready. There are times you dislike the friend circle of your spouse. You often flare up in anger against the long work timings of your spouse. You become angry when your spouse spends long hours in his or her work without spending time with you. Many a time you find it impossible to adjust to the preference your spouse has to certain brands and the things you plan to buy for your home. It is rather alarming that the list of your intolerance towards your spouse is lengthy and never ending. Do you know what happens when you're intolerant towards your spouse? When you're intolerant, you intrude into the rights of your spouse. When you lose your patience for the minor faults of your spouse, the atmosphere in your home is always confrontational and hostile between you. You fail to notice the good qualities of your spouse as you're too concentrated in making much ado about his or her minor mistakes. Does this mean you should tolerate everything your spouse does? Not at all. There are certain things you should never tolerate in your marriage. You should never tolerate the verbal and physical abuse of your spouse. You should make your anger open when your spouse is irresponsible. You should definitely retaliate when your spouse makes demeaning and degrading comments about you before your friends or relatives. You should confront your spouse when he or she makes snide remarks about your upbringing or family or religion. You should not tolerate abuse of any kind from your spouse. Tolerance does not mean you should allow your spouse demean you and get away with it. You must fight fair to make your spouse understand that his or her unwarranted behavior will not be tolerated by you. You should never ever forego your self-respect in the name of tolerance. When your spouse deliberately goes out of the way to make your life hell, you should not take it silently. You have every right to make your spouse realize that you cannot be taken for granted. But you must make sure that you do not make a mountain out of a mound. Here are some easy ways to practice tolerance in your marriage. Overlook the minor faults of your spouse. Take everything in the right spirit. Understand that your spouse is an individual with his or her own way of doing things. Be sportive and overlooking. Realize that one bad day in your relationship does not mean a bad marriage. Accept the fact that words spoken in anger are often superficial and unintentional. Here are intelligent tips for wives to practice tolerance towards a husband. Stop the habit of nagging your husband for his disorganized way of strewing things around. Do not yell at your husband for his forgetfulness. Be mild when advising your husband to overcome his laziness. Understand that as a man, your husband is basically lazy. Overlook small and minor faults of your husband with indulgence. You can tease your husband about his shabbiness but never ever degrade him about it. Practice patience when your husband is out of mood. Do not take his angry words as a sign of his lost love for you. Simple tips for a husband to be tolerant towards his wife. Be patient when your wife takes a great deal of time getting ready. As a woman, your wife is concentrated on her looks. Do not feel that your wife is shrewish when she nags you. Understand the simple fact that your wife is basically emotional, so her worrying nature might make her behave somewhat nagging towards you. Do not feel that your wife is throwing away money when she spends a lot on dresses and beauty parlors. Your wife never spends tons of money on electronic goods as you do, so give her the liberty to indulge herself. You need patience and endurance to coexist in peace with your spouse. Tolerance works magic in your marriage. When you're patient in that one moment of your anger, you can enjoy many years of happiness in your married life. Did this video make you understand why tolerance is important to your marriage? Marriage Realities will have many such relationship eye-openers. Subscribe to my channel to understand your marriage in a new light. Press the bell icon for updates about my latest relationship videos. Make love forever until death do us part your relationship goal.